your men can have love for the truckie. Beautiful minds, but we love getting ugly. Risk takers with a clover, man, we love getting lucky. You run, we chase fire, I love when it ducks me. Tones go off, house watch, read the address out. 1075, get up off the magic couch. 500 gallons prepared for the baddest drought. Who else you want on the way when disaster's out? Can't even get a little bit rattled when you enter with exit apparel. Mayday, member down, they'll drag you. You won't get this from every Tom, Dick, and Harold, but here's a view from the top floor with Mickey Farrell.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The View from the Top Floor. Today's episode, I met up with Jeremy at Thumbody Coffee in Paramus. We chose a spot in between New York City and Jeremy's house, and we came up with Thumbody Coffee. Really, really cool place. So if you're in the Paramus area or the Bergen County area, be sure to stop in and say hello. It's a coffee shop themed place. It's a coffee shop themed record shop where you go in, you grab the vinyl off the rack, you throw it on the turntable, listen to anything you want, any time of day, and just kind of hang out. Really, really cool vibe. So if you're in the area, be sure to stop in and check that out. One more thing before we get into the episode. If you've ordered any shirts or stickers or pins and have not received them, please, please let me know. The U.S. Postal Service rather sucks, to be honest. I'm sending things out. They're not getting to where they're supposed to be. They're getting sent back. Even though the postage is correct, they're telling me it's not correct. They bring it back, and they say, we don't know why it got sent back. So a lot of problems with the post service right now. So if you didn't receive something, please let me know, and I'll get that corrected as quickly as possible. All right? So again, Jeremy and I at Thumbody Coffee in New Jersey. Check it out. Hope you enjoy it.
Thumb good. Cool place, man. Coffee shop with a records room and 2 turntables at the counter. It's pretty cool.
Just need a microphone.
That's it, man. 2 turntables and a microphone. What are we doing? Drinking coffee? Catching up? I think it's pretty cool. We talked about, last time you and I sat down and chatted, a while back, we did some tactics. And it's a very different conversation because you come from a very different place than I do. Your foundation's the same as mine. But then going to an urban department where you are today, very different than how we operate. And I think that we got a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
We got a lot of comments, a lot of
people
chimed in.
A lot of good feedback. You were very intimidated to talk tactics, which I think is crazy. I know your pedigree. I know where you're from. And I know that the culture where you are is progressively good fire department.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that a majority of the listeners are from that caliber of place. So your insight on anything tactical is very important.
You know, it's always been a challenge for me because it's like, you know, guys want to hear from people that have a strong pedigree, a big name on their coat in a way, and go to fires every single day. And I do not, right? I do not have any of those. But I've been to a lot of fires over the years. I am absolutely a practitioner on the fire ground. I absolutely love going to fires. I'll talk shop all day long, but it's just with a national platform, it's a little bit harder sometimes to feel comfortable enough to speak tactics unless the conversation skews in that direction, and then I have no problem jumping in, but I'm not going to be out there banging a drum about certain operations. Yet I think we need to have more conversation about the suburban and rural tactics. A lot of what's shared is urban based. Those are the guys that have the pedigree to share. I think that guys from smaller towns, suburban and rural departments, the way we fight fires is fundamentally the same, but can be very, very different.
Yeah, and I think that on the level of the volunteer service, you have to be well-rounded because 100%. You don't know who's showing up. You have to be able to pivot in the moment. Understanding where you fit in is so huge. Where I grew up, the volunteer fire department there, you take your personal vehicle to the fire.
Yeah.
Because the square mileage was a very large area. There's something to that because you had to be able to pull up, size up very quickly on the fly, and then understand exactly that gap that needs to be filled because this is getting done, this is getting done. Well, I'm the third guy on scene. What's next? And if you can't be able to think in a sequential order of the fireground tactics, it's failure on the fireground. There's no success in it if you don't know where to fit in.
Yeah, and I mean, from a volunteer standpoint about that type of thing, you're talking home response, you're talking accountability-wise, who's there, right?
Yeah.
It really opens up a magnitude of questions and things that have to be thought of that in your job don't really have to be thought of, right? We know our riding assignments, we know our positions, we know the companies are staffed, and they know who's working that day and so on. So accountability is right there at the get. You know your companies and your people. Very different on the volunteer side. This is what I love is that conversation back and forth because I think, you know, a lot of people want to emulate. We have a lot of volunteer firefighters out there that want to be aggressive urban style firefighters. That's what's being pushed out right now. And guys are eating that up because it's sexy. It's fun. It's salty. All those beautiful adjectives that we like to throw around in the fire service. But one thing you always talk about is knowing your job and doing your job well. And that can be a simple task of knowing how to do just the simplest tasks well. We need to focus on that and maybe not worry so much about your looks or how you want to be perceived. If you want to be perceived well, know your job. And that comes from volunteer or career, right?
Yeah, I mean, the word aggressive, it gets thrown around often, and I actually despise that word.
I do too.
Fire service. At one time, it had its place, but it's gotten out of hand now, where we've lost the understanding of what that means. It always meant those were the guys that were going to put the fire out. They're the ones going to do the work. Made you an aggressive firefighter.
Right.
Especially in the volunteer world. You had aggressive guys, aggressive departments. It means that they just put the fire out.
The bread and butter guys that are there all the time, they always happen to be at the fires, right?
Yep, the same guys that are hanging out on the Sunday afternoon, washing their cars or whatever it is. They were the aggressive, quote-unquote, firefighters because they were a team. They understood each other on levels. Other people didn't really understand from a civilian standpoint. When I say civilian standpoint, you're not a uniformed force behind union supporting you, whatever that is, you're a volunteer fireman. As in, just your neighbors.
Yeah.
Your friends.
Yeah.
Go in a fire truck, go to a fire.
I want to double down on that because the word aggressive, I think the connotation today, we throw that word around so loosely. But in fact, if you know your job and you do your job well, it is aggressive firefighting. You're expected to be aggressive. Yeah. And I think what happens is we've created a secondary meaning around that word that people buy into, and they think by saying aggressive, it means they're above the norm, And that's scary because if the norm is not being aggressive, then we need to really focus on that, right?
I think that the norm in the culture of firefighting today is unaggressive firefighting because you're not doing your job. And I think that comes from the command staff level all the way down to the probationary firefighter, is that no one's showing the next person what to do. And that's what started this for you, was passing on the stories, the traditions of the guys that came along before you. There's so much to that, but from the understanding of the tactical side of things, it's not getting done. We have people in command staff levels on from the biggest department to the smallest department with zero experience. And zero experience is relevant to where you come from. So a small 1 square mile town might be no fires in your entire career. To a major city, it can be 10 fires in your career, but it's zero experience in the sense of how many mistakes you've made ultimately to get to that point of commanding a fire scene.
You talk about that all the time. You talk about like mistakes and humility and all those things. And I just wonder, it took me a long time. I mean, I'm going on year 30 now, right? This coming month, February, would be 30 years, on the calendar of being a firefighter. And I only until the last 8 or 10 years really understood the importance of bettering myself, meaning you make an error on the fire ground, do you learn from it? Are you dialing in and trying to hone and, for lack of better words, perfect your tasks or your job, right? And I never put much credibility to that. I was always ass slaps and high fives and let's go, And now my point of view of how I perform at a fire ground and the expectation on the fire ground is very different than what it used to be. And I think that comes with maturity. And I think that comes with understanding that the job progresses. We talk about it all the time, you and I both. Long game, enjoy the process. But there is a process. A lot of these young guys are jumping at the word aggressive, and it's probably because they're starving to be allowed to be aggressive. You hit on a good thing. You said the job seems to be trending away from the norm of getting in and doing the job. We're holding our people back. We're not letting our people work. Command staffs aren't dialed in like they used to be. They're pulling guys out of buildings quicker, things like that, right? Those are all absolute issues on the fire ground. We need a culture where we allow our people to work, and that is where the aggressive stance is already built in, right? Doesn't that make sense?
It does, and I think that a lot of it has to do with addressing the wrong issues in the fire service. We can go to a fire and burn it to the ground, but everyone went home, and that's okay. Then it's not okay. You lost that game.
Right.
You lost.
Right. There are losses.
Yes, but we're so concerned about other politics within the firehouse. Oh, that's a big issue. So-and-so wanted to rent a hall this week. He doesn't have the right insurance form. That's a hot issue in the volunteer world. On the union side, you go to a fire, you have a company drop a nozzle around the building. Well, no one really addresses it because we're covering it up for the tradition and pride of that reputation of that department. And then reality, there's other issues that are being fought that really nothing to do tactically sound, which that's the core values of this job, is protecting the lives and property of the town or city we work and live in. We've misdirected the importance of what is important. And with that, we've lost the idea of what aggressiveness is. And you have young kids starving to go to fires, to do better, and to be romanticized of what this job always was.
That's it.
Now we're at a stalemate.
Yeah.
And that stalemate is creating a lot of anger from every level, from the top level down to the lost pro trying to find his way, people are angry.
I think people are angry because that's where we are today, right? Instead of taking ownership and reviewing and reflecting and finding a cure or a fix or working at making it better, it's just easier to point the finger, blame, and be angry about it.
The ultimate cure for this is identifying that humility is the forward progression of today's fire service. And when we can identify that, accept that, and own it from the top all the way down, that's where we're going to see progress of what this job may be and what it should be and what it once was.
I think, too, if you create an environment of firemanship, if you create an environment where people are allowed to work at their craft and get better at what they do and promote the best of the tactical sense, the operational stuff, then all the other horse shit in your fire department disappears. It really does, right? Because you look at some of the best companies in your job or some of the best fire departments in the volunteer world, there are standout companies that you know are aces from the top down and from the bottom up, right? And the beautiful thing about that is they don't have any of the bullshit because their focus is strictly on the tactical and operational sense, and all that other minutia that comes along with it is fixed. It doesn't exist. The bullshit, the nonsense disappears when you're well-oiled and you know your job and you're allowed to perform.
Every firehouse has its bullshit. It's cuntiness, per se.
Yeah, 100%.
And when we have lack of work, that cuntiness
Flares
grows.
up.
Yes. It's sick in everything.
Sure.
On a football team, and you're losing every Sunday,
Right.
that locker room's probably a lot of cunts.
I was on a softball team for many years, man. We a lot of L's in the columns, you know?
But until you can come together and hold that standard that was
Right.
set, a lot of companies and departments on this nation riding on the coattails of the brothers that came along before them.
100%.
And it's a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous cycle because I'm seeing it firsthand. Great companies being average companies because that standard has slipped just a little bit. And when you slip a little bit, eventually it starts to slip a lot. Dominoes fall the wrong way, and then you have a company you can't rely on. And in my job, when you're going to the floor above, you better be able to rely on that engine that's down the block.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
Yeah, details matter.
Yes.
And I think things slip by when we allow the details to get a little gray, right? Things should be very black and white in a lot of ways. I mean, the fire ground is fluid. It's always changing, and we have to pivot and understand where we fit in, right? But there are core details that absolutely matter. And it's as simple as, water on the ground in the bay. Do you clean it up or do you step over it? Those details matter because if you're willing to take that moment and get the squeegee or mop it up, right? Then if there's something out of place on the engine, you're going to take care of that there too.
Yep.
And if there's something out of place on the fire ground, you're going to take care of it there too. It's the details that absolutely matter. And for the sake of ease and maybe lack of pride or some laziness, I find a lot of the details today are being overlooked. We don't consider them important. I think that that's so wrong. I think we've skewed so far away from the foundation from which we all came, and that's really understanding the details because the details matter.
We should introduce the game of chess into every fire academy. Seriously.
I wish I knew how to play.
Yeah.
I played it when I was a kid, but I couldn't tell you. I don't remember it.
But in all seriousness, like the game of chess, it's like you're thinking 10 steps ahead of what you're
Right.
doing, but moving a pawn seems minuscule in the moment. That simply is picking up that coupling, moving 3 steps, dropping it off a tire of a parked car. Ultimately, water on the fire because the line's going to move now. But that's that pawn moving, that coupling moving, checkmates water on the fire. But no one realizes that pawn is what did that. People overlook that. They step over that line. It's very important that the details do matter. The devil's in the details of everything we do. But
Yes, sir.
it's
Go ahead. I'm listening. My brain is going 1,000 miles a minute right now, and if I don't make a note in my phone right now about what we're talking about,
no, it's fine.
we're going to lose it. So keep going.
So I play chess with my son. I play with him quite often. And he plays basketball. He's 10 years old. Now, he's not scoring the most points in the team, but he has the most assists, the most rebounds. I asked him, I go, buddy, you're 3 steps ahead of everyone.
Yes.
Why is that? And he says to me, he's like, I kind of feel like I'm playing chess. Like I'm looking at the court and realizing what's next and where I should fit in. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard in my life because this is everything I talk about, everything I think about on the fire ground. He picked it up naturally from comparing chess to the X's and O's of basketball. Basketball IQ, firefighter IQ. It all comes together. But it
How
starts
old is he?
10.
10.
And it comes from humility, though, because how many times when we're playing and he makes a bad move, he puts his hand out. I said, no, we play to the end. The other day, I made a bad move and I was pressed for time. I'm like, buddy, I got to go. He's like, we play to the end. I said, okay.
Damn.
And he beat me, but he beats me. He's 10. He just naturally has that brain to think about, okay, this is the step here, but 3 steps from here, I need to be there. And I see his eyes looking at the chessboard, and at basketball, when he's bringing the ball up, I see him looking around. He knows exactly where to put that ball.
You know, when it's like playing like Madden or like playing a game, and you can highlight which move you want, and it highlights the play or whatever before you choose which play you want to take. My brain works that way too a lot of times. Is like I'll see options in front of me. I'm sizing up this room. I'm sizing up the situation, and I can literally see those highlighted plays in front of me and which one do I want to take. I love that. He's 10 years old. That's huge. You're setting them up for the right path, man. That's big.
So again, I think people laugh at the game. When I give one of my classes, like anyone study the game of chess,
right?
People are like, chess, what's this guy talking about? And then very quickly it goes into like the events, right? And the details, and the devil is the details. The pawn is a small move. It really ultimately checkmate. This whole breakdown, but I think after I'm done with that presentation or that part of my class, people can really parallel it to the fire ground. Like, wow, that makes sense. I got to think 3-10 steps ahead of it. Building construction, same thing. You can take building construction and have all the different classes. Have Vinny Dunn teach you how they fall down when they're burning, and have someone else teach you about how they build them in a construction theory class. But no one's really talking about the speed versus velocity of how those fires burn in real time, where a wood frame building is a different tempo than would be a fire resistant or fireproof building. So that's 2 different types of fire of tempo. Thinking wood frame, I got to be 7 steps ahead of where I am right now. So if my guys are here, I got to have my guys there now, because it's a different tempo. Fireproof building, a little bit different. Pieces are moved a little bit differently at a different time, a different tempo, a different flow.
How do we get there? I mean, your son he's a remarkable kid, and it comes from good parenting and, you know, things other than the world in which we live today, right? The value of reading, the value of getting outside. I know he's outdoorsy, loves to fish. You guys play chess. I saw him you sent me a picture of him doing a puzzle, because I'm kind of a puzzle nerd at times, right? There's all these great things that you introduce, and I think that those are very valuable assets, because I think what that's going to do is that creates a foundation of inquisitiveness in problem solving, initiative, being willing to take a chance. Those are all things that we need to be teaching. We need to have those foundational values at the very get of a probie coming into the firehouse too, creating an environment from which they can learn like that.
I think it also comes from identifying for that 3 to 5 year guy that wants to be that aggressive firefighter, is that there's life outside the fire service. And if we can learn different things, different talents, ultimately it reflects what we're doing on the fire ground. We have to be able to accept that. That's something that I had a hard time with when I was younger, because I was so focus driven of getting to where I wanted to be in life.
Right.
During that path of getting there, I realized that everything else I was doing leading up to that ultimately is what pushed me there. I just need the confidence to do it. That's important. And I don't think that with the video game era and kids being indoors rather than outdoors, that is a problem when young firefighters come to the firehouses. They just don't have the skills of making those mistakes in real time and correcting it. When I'm at work, I love nothing more. Like, I want to be home with my kids, right? But if I'm at work and I get home late and I come into the garage and my tools are everywhere, that means my son had to figure something out because I was at work. And I love that. And I tell you, buddy, all my fishing stuff, all my surfboards, skateboards, all my tools, they're all yours. Don't let your friends fuck them up. Don't lose them. Just put them back. But they're all yours. Nothing is off limits. Because when I'm out there, I want them to be able to be creative and learn. So if I come in and there's a wrench there and there's nuts over there and screws there and the bike pumps over there, that means all day he had problems and he solved those problems in real time. We have to have our kids be more hands-on. That translates to success on the fire ground many years later.
I was using a circular saw at like 12 years old by myself, right? My dad's at work all the time, and I love to tinker and build and fuck around with stuff. My mechanical aptitude is very high because, you know, outside of the firehouse, I work in a mechanical aptitude job. I'm a technical, you know, salesman for a bearing and power transmission company, and hydraulics and pneumatics and all these motors and pumps. These are all things that I grew up with working on. I love to tinker. And there's so much value in that. I mean, companies even sell those kits now. They're like, teach your kid how an engine works. And they ship you like a little engine that, you know, for the desktop that you put together. Those things absolutely matter. I think that we have to truly believe and understand that as much as the job is changing technologically, the core values and tenets of the job is not changing. It is blue collar. And I need you to understand mechanical aptitude. I need you to understand how to use hand tools and equipment and know what leverage means and pendulums and angles and all those things. Those things all very much matter. We have to be sure and not take for granted, because I think a lot of the older guys take for granted that these kids should already have these skills when they come in.
I just talked about this at the kitchen table this morning. Sitting down with one of the guys, we were just talking about next generation and how guys aren't just showing them the right thing as far as the tools, because they don't know. Senior guys are checked out. They're at that point. It happens everywhere in every department. I understand that. No one's showing these kids how to hold the tool.
Right.
I think a great drill for any young firefighter, career, volunteer, is your work night, your drill night, or if he's the probing in the firehouse for a 24, you got the irons, here's the Halligan. Carry it all day. Because he becomes intimate with that tool. He knows the counterweight. It becomes an extension of his body. You can always see the good and busy companies, when I say busy, just the ones that are going out the door more often than others. You get off the rig, those tools are very natural in their hand. They don't think twice about it. Now when it's time to come to a task under a little bit of stress, it's very natural to know how to get to a certain point, reposition the tool, do it again. You see videos or you see pictures of other firefighters that don't get those opportunities day in and day out. Getting the tool in their hand is the ultimate challenge. Now it comes to an obstacle. It's almost impossible with a little bit of stress.
I would agree. And companies like yours that's going out the door 15, 20, 25 times a day in a tour, whereas a volunteer company might be going out 25 times a month, right? So it's like, this is where the fire service cannot be discussed in a broad stroke. We can't just lump the fire service together, because firefighting truly is local. And so you have to understand that what's understood at your job could be very foreign and different somewhere else. And we have to have realistic conversations about that and know your value, know your worth, know your operations, and train accordingly. I agree with you. I would have a great opportunity to understand how to marry a Halligan and a 6-foot New York hook together, right? Like, how does that work? How do you marry them together? Perfect example. So you're carrying two tools. You got a 6-foot hook and your Halligan. What do? Do you put one tool down when you're using the other? Where do you put it down? Those are all things that, like, I've learned over time.
Yeah.
Is like, where do I want to keep my Halligan if I'm hooking, so somebody doesn't grab it, so it doesn't walk off, I don't lose it, all those things. Is that discussed? No. It's almost like we let guys fend for themselves to figure all that shit out. The other thing too, Mick, is like, we always were told, you and I growing up in the firehouse, right? Because you and I are basically the same age. Are you older, by the way?
No, yeah.
You sure?
Positive.
All right. I just have a youthful appearance, and I guess that's what it is. When we came into the fire service, a lot of it was, shut up, we'll get to you. Go in the corner, listen with your ears, don't talk, right? But they did get to us, and they did show us. And I'm finding today that we are lacking guys taking that time, so we can still have the same mentality. Shut up, kid, we'll get to you. Listen. Well, it's great, they're listening. Nobody's telling them anything anymore.
Well, it's a disconnect, because those guys that are in those senior roles, they don't really have the experience that the guys were in the roles when we were coming up. There is an intimidation factor now of the fact that kid might know more than me. So let me not go in and say anything. Because if you wait to a certain point, it gets to a certain point where it's almost awkward to have those conversations about things that should have been taking place the first couple months. So now it comes down to, oh, that kid's pretty squared away. I'm not going to take it one step further because he might embarrass me, because it's the generation of why.
Yeah.
We weren't that generation. You would tell us something and I would figure out why on my own.
Right.
Theory would come from doing it and learning it and making mistakes.
Yep.
Now I tell you to do something, and your next thing is, well, why do we do that? My answer is, well, figure it out. Go try, make a mistake, and you'll figure out why we do things. But they don't want to do that. So it's that stalemate.
There is certainly a fear in the fire service today about making mistakes, or the lack of trying so that they don't make a mistake, so that they're not highlighted or ostracized or picked on. There's a lot of that, right? That's social media. That's that social media grind, right? Where you're afraid to, you can be anonymous and say whatever you want, right? You don't take ownership for it, right? In the firehouse, we have a lot of kids today that aren't making an effort or trying because they're afraid to falter. That's a problem.
Yeah, and then the fire ground is a great equalizer. They say the kitchen is. The kitchen is for your soul. What we do is crawl down hallways, and if you can't crawl down the hallway, there'd be a time where you'd be asked to leave certain companies. We're not getting tested enough for those opportunities anymore, so we have guys in places and companies they should not be. And it's just not my job. I'm saying that this is on a national level. You have guys in places that they would never be able to be there 10 years ago, 20 years ago. 30 years ago, it wasn't even an option to be there.
Right.
But now they get to these points where they're riding the coattails of brothers and sisters that came along before them. It's almost an embarrassment. And now they're embarrassed because they do have that front piece or that patch, and they realize, I really don't know what I'm doing. Drill in the firehouse. They're not the first guy to step up. They're the last guy to go.
Yep.
Watch.
Yep.
All right, let me give it a shot. If they even give it a shot, praying for a run during that time when he's supposed to come up and go, you know?
You're right. You're 100% right. How many guys step forward? But that's the part of it too. It's like if they're not going to step forward in training, they're certainly not going to step forward on the fire ground.
Right.
That's terrifying.
When I was teaching Pro V school, I would always pick out, like, watch the kids, right? All right, who wants to go first, whatever scenario. The ones that would always come up first were always the same ones. They were always the ones that I would say, where do you want to go? And kind of pick their brains and see what their mind was. Most times they would say, wherever I can learn. They didn't have their company. They probably did have their companies, so their burrows picked out. They just said, place I'm going to learn. And that was always the greatest answer. Cool. And those are the greatest guys that go the farthest places.
No, I think there's a lot of merit to that. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I think we're at an interesting time. You know, it's the whole conversation right now has been kind of, I don't want to say it's not negative. But it's certainly not like upbeat, like we're doing good. But I think that goes back to the ass slaps and high fives. You know, we just burn a house to the ground, guys. Like, let's have real conversation and real tailboard talk or a hot wash or whatever you call it. Todd Edwards, hot wash. That's where I learned it from him, like that word, mutual friend. That's where we have to make progress.
And I think we are, because as we were talking, I felt us going negative. I don't want to go negative.
No, right, I agree.
Because I think we're making great strides in training.
I do too.
Tremendous strides. All these micro conferences popping up everywhere. It's like the greatest thing that ever happened to the fire service. It's giving people a rebirth back into the job. The problem is it's the fine line of who's teaching the information and where that theory and experience comes from. That's the battle on. But the fact that we have people willing to come train, willing to learn, I think is tremendous, because I would say 10 years ago that didn't exist.
No, and opportunities today to perform and practice our craft in the field, on the streets, on the pavement, is not what maybe it was at one time. And so there are opportunities that didn't exist from years ago that exist today. These micro conferences. I mean, shit, how many of these kids, like, it is exciting to watch squared away companies have 6 guys in-house on a Wednesday night having dinner and just taking the truck down to grab meal and come back and hang out till 11, 12 o'clock in the volunteer house, just so that they're in-house. But it's not so much even just being there, whether they grab a run or not. It's the camaraderie and friendships they're building and all the building blocks that come with it. Because usually when you have guys dialed in like that, they're talking about football, they're talking about different things, you know, but they're also focused on the firehouse, you know, talking about a past job, right? Conversations come up. And I think that's such a big and important part that we're missing today. Like, I know my time in a volunteer firehouse is limited. I physically don't have the amount of time that I once had. And so I feel like I'm robbing these kids of any more time I could give them, because I go to, you know, we could be going out the door 6-8 times a day, you know, and it's like you're running back and forth. The kids are standing there and you're like, all right, guys, I'll see you at the next one. You run out instead of taking 10, 15 minutes and telling a story or, you know, asking them how they're doing or what'd you pick up on that run? You know, did you notice this? Did you do that? Those are the moments where I think we're misfiring. But there is an upside on the backside, is that there are still pockets and core groups of kids that want to learn this job. They want to be surrounded by it. They want to be a part of it. And I think what's exciting for me is when I watch some of these young kids get excited and inquisitive, that fires back up guys like me to be like, I got to get my ass down there more. Yeah. I gotta ride the back seat every once in a while with these guys. I gotta spend some extra time at drill night with them afterwards, or tell some more, make a point of telling some stories or texting them or giving them a quick phone call. That's what's infectious. When things are good in the firehouse, it's infectious, man. It just takes more work to be positive and pro fire than it is to be negative. Because, man, you jump on that negative train, goes quick.
Well, that's the thing. You get one negative guy. One who's complaining about too many runs after midnight, who's complaining about, oh, we have to go out and clean the hose, do hose testing. One negative guy. And next thing you know, the entire crew's negative.
100%.
It's dangerous.
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. And it is hard for the positive guys to remain positive and infectious and try to get others excited and to push back against the negative, because the negative's just so easy.
And especially when there's lack of work, and that's a problem everywhere. Is that I do think fire duty is up, to be honest with you, at least in the Northeast. The excuse, well, fire duty's down, so people just aren't into the job anymore and stuff like that. I don't really buy that. I believe that fire duty is up, and not that if fire duty is up, fires are getting more challenging every year. Guys are getting better with that, but we're also losing blocks in the same breath, you know? So it's about identifying that the job is getting harder, that there is more challenges. Stepping up to the plate and hitting a home run comes from going to the batting cages. And that is going back to all these micro conferences. You and I get to travel all over the country. I find it amazing when we do a 2-day seminar or even it's a 1-day seminar, the room's full of 100 firefighters that want to learn. And they're sitting on the edge of the seat of everything you're saying. And then I get in my car, you go back in the hotel and you're just reflecting on it. Wow. Like the fire service is alive and well nationwide. It really, really is. There's pockets of hate everywhere, but overall, it's a pretty healthy fire service.
You watch how many of these people take time out of their day to attend a conference, a lecture, to go. I mean, just it's one thing in person, right? I've been starting to do a lot of speaking now, and last week I did a keynote down in Florida at the FDSOA conference, and there was like 450 people at that conference. It was wild. And I got to talk about, the topic, the Safety Officers Association. So I said, safety, today's dirty word, because the connotation of safety in a lot of fire departments today is really on a negative level, because we throw safety in front of actually perfecting and performing our craft, where safety initiatives have taken the focus instead of actually just being a fireman, right? And so I talk about all that. But when I was done speaking, people take time to be at that conference, but then they take more time to line up and speak with you afterwards, to come up and shake your hand and say, hey, thank you, I appreciate your message, or, I like that one slide, or that one thing you said, I can relate to that. Like, that's the exciting part for me, is like when you see that you're making an impact, or, you're pointing something out, or you're educating along the way, people will take time. I get messages every single day. And I know you do too. And it's just like, people are out there. They are hungry. They are willing to learn. They want to learn. They're starving for information. Let's give them the right information.
I just did a memorial seminar in Maryland with Maryland State Chiefs Association.
Right.
Put on this great event. And there had to have been 1,000 hours of experience in that room.
Right.
It was all gray hair. And I get in front of this room and I start off right away and say, wow, I'm really intimidated right now. These guys, more experience than us together, collectively, like incredible. Every single one of them sat through, I think I did 8 hours of lecturing between morning and the afternoon, the entire day, taking notes, asking questions, participating. Even I love when you get the senior guy that will say something, he'll raise his hand, and then he'll build off what I said. And then we have a little dialogue.
Love that. Yeah.
Because when you have guys with that much experience, it doesn't care where you are in the country, we're kind of all cut from the same cloth and talking about the same mistakes, the same experiences, the same fires. That's a lot of fun too. But the conferences, when it's like a 2-day event, like a Friday, Saturday, or a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something that's important, especially ones that are going to be going to these conferences for your first time, make the social.
Yes.
If you don't make the first night, the Friday night, when you kind of meet and greet, that's fine. But make the one after we actually give the class, because the real learning takes place at the bar, at the pub, having dinner, having lunch. That's the real learning. And that's important to be there, because that's where it's not formal, very informal, and it's very down to earth, and it's very matter of fact. And that's where you really talk about not only like the tactical side of things, but the emotional side of the job, families, friends, and we become friends. When I start traveling, I realize like I have friends all over now.
Yes.
Because of those social events. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's the next level of buy-in too, right? Because when you're willing to lower your guard a little bit and get to know somebody. I mean, it's funny, you and I are here today sharing a cup of coffee and talking shop, but as soon as this camera's turned off, we're not really talking about the fire service, right? We're talking about families and kids and things that we enjoy and so on. And I think that that's part of it, right? I'm grateful for all the opportunities that have opened because of National Fire Radio and for the fire service. I'm grateful. It has made me a better person for it. I know you feel the same way in a lot of ways. And I challenge people, if you're looking for something more, it's out there. Go get it. Yeah. You can find it. You can find it. I don't ever want your love or passion to be robbed from you because you didn't find what you were looking for You were exposed to a bad company early on.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't find somebody that was a mentor or somebody that could impress upon you the importance of this job. I think those are all important things. And on top of that, it's nobody's fault but your own.
Change comes from within.
Yeah,
You can't wait for someone else to change you.
that's right.
And I say that after my class, you come in, and I always tell guys, take what you gather here, and the number one thing that you take away is loyalty.
Yeah.
Take care of this job. It'll take care of you and your family tenfold for generations to come. Beyond that, you're fired up after a conference, and you want to go back and change the world. But change comes from within, and if you really, really focus on yourself, eventually, other guys will pick up on that. And those negative guys will start to see you changing things within you,
Yeah.
which ultimately parallels the fireground and the firehouse life, and then you became a mentor for guys that are lost. It's very important. And you don't have to go to a million fires to be that mentor. You just have to be a guy doing the right thing, focusing on yourself and getting better.
I love that.